Welcome to the Worth Listening podcast, where we focus on having positive and productive conversations around money. I'm your host, Lauryn, a 4-time Olympian and certified financial planner. On this show, my guests share their money stories. Everyone has a unique story and experiences both wins and losses when it comes to money. My intent is to give listeners something they can relate to, something that builds their courage to be open and take control of their own money story. When I'm not creating a great show for my listeners, I'm running my company, Worth Winning, where I help individuals and families organize their finances. Check us out at worth-winning.com. All right, now on with the show. Welcome to August, everyone. What a beautiful, beautiful summer it has been. I hope it's been a beautiful summer for you as well. I am coming to you on this lovely August 1st from the French Alps, where I wish I could take a picture for a podcast, but that's not a possible thing. But yes, I am visiting my aunt who lives in the French Alps, and views are amazing. So not a bad place to be recording a podcast from. As I said, I hope you all are having a wonderful summer. I usually take some downtime in July, and I was able to go to Colombia and hang out there, practice my Spanish. Yeah, life's going pretty good. We are changing the business model. I think we've kind of alluded to that quite a bit. So if you don't know, what we have done at Worth Winning up to this point is help individuals, young professionals, millennials, however you want to call us, organize their finances. And we've now changed our business model to working more one-to-many. So still want to help young professionals, but want to have a larger impact. So we're moving into corporate wellness, going into companies and talking to your company, doing half-day workshops, full-day workshops, multiple-day retreats, doing retreats for you and your family and friends, doing it for couples. We just want to get people together, get them in the same space talking about money, and really provide some education that comes with integrity, because there is tons of information out there. TikTok, Instagram, you name it, social media has something. And I'm finding a lot of it to be really gimmicky. So I'd love to be able to come in and educate people on what they need to be thinking about so that they are empowered to be able to take control of their finances. Because financial planning, in and of itself in an ongoing and personal one-on-one way is not for everybody. Some people can handle their own financial situation, but they also need to know what they don't know so that they can actually see the gaps and fill the gaps in their financial lives. So that is what we are moving towards. If you belong to an organization or a company and you think that you need financial literacy or that you could benefit from some sort of workshop, do not hesitate to reach out. Emily at worth-winning.com. My assistant Emma can get you all set up. We also have a form on our website you can fill out to get the ball rolling, whatever floats your boat. So I wanted to do an episode today that is all about a current event. I closed my calendar for the month of July. I very studiously worked on what my availability was for the month of August and September. I opened my calendar and I woke up the next morning to be fully booked for the month of August and September. I mean, completely jam-packed. I think it's Antonio Brown that says business is booming. So I know you might be a little confused because you're just like, Lauryn, you just talked about the idea of not working one-on-one with individuals anymore and changing the business model. Well, I still do student loan planning, and student loans have gone crazy. So that is today's episode. We are going to be talking all about what you need to know related to getting ready to start repaying your loans again, because it's coming. It is coming down the pipeline. So like I said, I mentioned I'm fully booked for August and September. The company that I work with, student loan planner, I think we are booked out to October. We've hired about 5 new people to try to help with some of that to get us back to being able to take on some additional consultations. But it is real this time. A lot of people have put those student loans to the back of their mind. They said, I'm never going to have to pay them again. I mean, you can't blame you if you have student loans. It's March 13th of 2020 is when people stop paying their loans. We are well over the 3-year mark of when no one has had to deal with this as a bill as part of their regularly monthly discretionary income. But the time is here. The time is now. There have been a lot of changes, and that is what I want to share with you today about. So if you got a friend that got student loans, if you have student loans, if you are a parent and you are thinking about taking out student loans for someone, Here are the pertinent pieces of the information that you need to know because, like I said, the payment is getting ready to begin again. So the pause is over on August 31st. The payment pause is ending officially. However, you're not going to have to make payments immediately after that, but interest is going to start to accrue. So September the 1st is when interest will start to accrue again after 3 years of having no interest. Why is this relevant? You may be a person who's been setting aside $300 or $400 a month, waiting to see what's happening with student loans. Like I don't want to make a payment because I'm not really sure if we're going to have to make a payment again. But I do want to be studious and continue to put money aside as if I was making my regular student loan payment. But now you got this big lump sum of money that you might need to throw towards your student loan and, knock it down so that you can pay it off a little bit quicker. Now, let me just say that is not a one-size-fits-all recommendation. You should not be making lump sum payments towards your student loans if you are a person who owes more than you earn. So let me give you an example. You owe $150,000 on your student loans and you earn $50,000 a year. It is excellent if you've been saving up this whole time all during COVID, but you're not paying off $150,000 of student loan debt. I don't care what that guy says that tells everybody to eat beans and rice and pay off all their debt no matter what. He's wrong. He doesn't know what he's talking about as it relates to student loans. Yeah, I said it. If you owe more than you earn, you should be looking at some of the forgiveness options. If you earn more than you owe, then it is likely, it's not one size fits all, once again, that you should be trying to make a lump sum payment or you should be trying to aggressively pay your student loans down. And this September 1st deadline where the interest is going to start accruing again, you want to kind of get ahead of that. So you can see why people are setting up consultations because already I've told you kind of like it depends on what your situation is, whether or not you should be doing this versus that. The other piece of the puzzle is that you're going to have a month of interest accruing, and then in October, payments are actually going to begin again. So you still got a couple of months before payments begin to get your mind right, get your budget right, start rearranging things and seeing what's going on. But be mindful of that rule of thumb as you go about making your plans. If you are one of the people that owe more than they earn, then you're probably looking at, like I said, a forgiveness route. What does that mean? That means you choose an income-driven repayment plan. There's a ton of them. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on those today, but ICR, income contingent repayment, pretty much the worst plan out there. IBR, income-based repayment. Also, it's mediocre. It's a little bit better than ICR, but not the best. Then we have the pay-as-you-earn plan. That's only for people who borrowed exclusively after October 1st of 2007. And then you have the new SAVE plan. So there used to be revised pay-as-you-earn, and now there is no more revised pay-as-you-earn. It is being replaced by the SAVE plan that President Biden announced on June 30th, along with a lot of the other changes when the Supreme Court struck down the option to forgive student loans on a kind of more blanket basis. There was a 10 or 20K forgiveness that was coming down the pipeline that had kind of held things up for quite a while. So if you've never heard of any of those income-driven plans, you got to get on the internet immediately, studentaid.gov, and start learning about those. Like I said, book a student loan consultation with someone to kind of get your plan in place because what you don't know can be costing you tens of thousands of dollars. The other thing to be thinking about is public service loan forgiveness. Public service loan forgiveness is for people who work at any 501c3 or government agency. So that's city, state, federal government, whatever. All of those are applicable, but you absolutely want to be considering that if you have student loans and you work at any of those qualified employers. They changed quite a bit of those rules as well. So independent contractors, so 1099 people now have a way that they could qualify. A lot of medical professionals in Texas and California that did not previously qualify for public service loan forgiveness are now qualifying for public service. There has been a ton of changes. You need to be on an income-driven repayment plan, and you need to have made at least 10 years worth of payments while working at a qualified employer. Now, generally, 10 years worth of payments is actually making a payment on a monthly basis over the course of 10 years. Well, right now, because of all the COVID craziness, forbearances can count, deferments can count, being on something other than the income-driven repayment plan can count. It is the wild, wild west out here, which is why people need to be really thinking about what their student loan situation is and what is best for them. So a few other deadlines and updates that I want to share before we get into, actually I do have an episode for you today. It's a throwback episode that goes nicely with this topic. But our IDR account adjustment is also a big thing that is out right now and has a 12/31 deadline. So if you need to consolidate your loans, you need to do that before December 31st of 2023 in order to be eligible for getting the highest number of payment counts, getting old payment plans that were not properly counted previously. So, like I said, you might have been on extended, you might have been on graduated, you might have had a bunch of forbearances, might have had a bunch of deferments. In school deferments don't count, but maybe you did a hardship deferment or you did a deferment because you're in the Peace Corps or something like that. All of those things are going to be counted toward an income driven plan. They are making an income driven repayment tracker. So you actually will know, where am I in my 20 or 25 years toward repayment? They are cleaning up the system quite a bit. So a lot of people don't love our government in general, but I have to give them some kudos for the revamp that they've done to the program. I think things will be a lot clearer for borrowers going forward. That way you can better manage your finances going forward. But you've got to tune in now, take advantage of the programs and the various things that are out there that could really help you move yourself along in the repayment process. And consolidation is one of them. Consolidation is not one size fits all. Everybody does not need to consolidate, but a lot of people do need to consolidate. If you consolidate and you don't need to consolidate, let me give you an example of how it could be harmful. Let's say that you stop paying your loans in 2020, like most people did. Well, you probably provided either your 2018 or your 2019 tax return. In general, people make more money each year. So in 2023, I hope for you that you are earning more than you earned in 2018 or 2019. If you give them your new income information right now, they're going to update your payment accordingly based on your current income. However, you don't have a requirement to give them your income information right now. In fact, what they've said is that for the first 6 months after payments begin, no one has to give their income information. That is awesome because a lot of people are being kicked out yet one more year before they have to update their payment. So let's say, as an example, you had a $0 payment. You had just come out of school in 2019. You signed up for an income-driven plan. COVID hit in 2020. Now you're working. You're making $100,000 a year. Life is going awesome. And it was, let's say, October of 2019 that you did this sign up, just to give an example. Well, October of 2023 would generally be when you have to recertify, but payments are just going to be starting then. It's within the first 6 months of payments restarting, like I said. So what are they doing? They're kicking you all the way over to October of 2024. So you had a $0 payment in 2019. You're going to pick up in October with a $0 payment that's going to be counting towards your income-driven repayment plan. And you're going to have that all the way until October of 2024, despite the fact that you're earning a six-figure salary now. That works greatly to your advantage. Now you see why people could be spending thousands or tens of thousands of dollars unnecessarily by not knowing what's going on with their student loans. Not having a good strategy in place could really mess you up in this situation. So be thinking about that. Like I said, consolidation is not one size fits all. The last thing I'll say about consolidation is that consolidation and refinancing are not the same thing. A lot of people think that those terms are interchangeable. And in general finance terms, I think they are a little bit interchangeable. But refinancing, when we're talking about student loans, is taking your loans out of the federal system, putting them with a private lender. So that's SoFi, Earnest, Common Bond. You're probably getting junk mail from all of them if you're a student loan borrower. Those companies are not scams. They're private companies that are giving you a better interest rate than the federal system, but your only option with those companies is to pay your loans back. You may be in a situation where you want to do the forgiveness that I've been talking about. You want to take advantage of things like the COVID forbearance. If you pass away with your federal student loans, those loans pass away with you. So there's no obligation of your estate. There's no obligation of anyone else around you. There's no co-signers and things like that. You want to be thinking about the fact that, like, within the federal system, there are certain benefits that you don't want to give up, or you may not want to give up. You need to be sure before you give them up in search of a better interest rate. And so that's the big difference between consolidating and refinancing. Refinancing happens outside of the federal system with a private company, no option other than to pay your loans back at a lower interest rate. Consolidation is taking all of the loans you have from all those different semesters, squishing them down into just two loans. It'll say direct consolidated subsidized, direct consolidated unsubsidized. And you will still have federal loans, but you will have created 2 new loans within the federal system, gotten rid of all your own loans. You will have the average weighted interest rate, and it may make you eligible for some of the things that I've been talking about. So it may turn your FFEL loans into direct loans. It may take your Perkins loans or your health professional loans and turn those into direct loans, which qualify for more things. It may update your payment history so that you're getting the highest number of payments counted toward all of your loans, so that you now are moving yourself along, like I said, quite a bit if you have different loans with different repayment periods. So one other thing I'll talk to you about is the idea that you can recertify your income. I gave you an example of somebody who had like $0 payments and wanted to keep their $0 payments. But what about if you're on the flip side and things are going a little bit rough for you? Life is out here lifing for all of us. So maybe your income has gone down quite a bit and you have maybe a $500 or $600 payment that's scheduled to begin again when payments begin in October. And right now you're not earning any income. Well, this is a good time to recertify your income and say, hey, my income has changed. It's gone down. Here's my new income. It's zero. And go get your $0 payment instead of picking up at that $500 payment. So you can recertify at any time when it's going to benefit you. And you absolutely want to do that. You do not want to recertify if it's not going to benefit you. You want to recertify when the government tells you to recertify. So be mindful of that. And if you're in a really tough situation right now, people have ill family members, they're, just like I said, stuff has come up. And even with a small income-driven repayment, you're not going to be able to afford to pay your monthly payment. There is a forbearance that's available that's not going to count against your regular traditional 3 years of forbearance. So that's kind of a last resort. I think the income-driven plan is where you should be trying to go, trying to work with a financial professional to figure out like what can you do to kind of straighten your financial situation out in general would be prudent. But there is a forbearance that's available to you. But I encourage you, do not stick your head in the sand. Do not ignore these student loans. Do not go back to what you were doing pre-COVID if you were one of those people that was already ignoring your loans. These loans do not have to be the death of you. You absolutely should not be ignoring them right now. And having a plan in place, understanding clearly what you need to do, can help you optimize your full financial picture and help you move forward, because everybody's out here trying to create wealth. Everybody's looking for ways to be able to be happy, live a values-driven life, retire in a reasonable time frame. So don't let this be the piece of the puzzle that gets you all jacked up. All right. Last thing I will say before I get into the episode for today is that the SAVE plan, there's just so much hoopla around it. And I think it's good hoopla because it is a really good plan. So like I said, revised pay as you earn, if you're on that payment plan, it's going away and it's being replaced by SAVE. The things that are interesting about it is that they're going to offer 5% of your discretionary income on a monthly basis as payments if you have undergraduate debt. And then it will still be 10% of income if you have graduate school debt. So that 10% is similar to the repay plan that already existed. But the coolest feature of this is the 2.25 times the federal poverty rate, whereas all the other income-driven plans are 1.5 times the federal poverty rate, and then based on family size. So why is that relevant? Basically, there's a certain amount of income related to the poverty rate that they sweep out of the scenario for you before they do the actual calculation for your student loan payment. So you want to be thinking about like, hey, am I able to use this plan as opposed to one of the plans that's going to be a 1.5 times or 150% of the poverty line because it's going to lower my payment. Now, the lowest payment is not always the best thing for you. Like you get the lowest payment now, but it costs you more of the long term. Like I said, it's not one size fits all, but it's a pretty cool feature because it's going to lower the payment for a lot of people. And some people need a lower payment for various reasons. They're going to benefit from that. They can redirect those dollars to their retirement, redirect them to saving for a home, redirect that to saving for their kids' education. So you want to take advantage of that if it's available, if it's appropriate for you. The other thing is that there is a interest subsidy of 100%. Wow. Big deal, because with the revised pay as you earn, there was an interest subsidy of 50%. What does this mean? The biggest problem that I hear people kind of lamenting about related to student loans is that they're watching their loan balance go up. They're like, I make my payment every month the way they told me to. It's what I can afford. It's based on my income. But I'm watching, like every year I owe $10,000 more than I started out with, and I'm making payments. Like it makes no sense to me, and it's really painful. And it's causing mental health issues for people. Well, now with this interest subsidy, any interest that would have accrued on this save as you save plan, does not accrue. So that is pretty awesome, if I do say so myself. So you're not going to be watching your loan balance go up anymore if there's interest that would be accruing on a monthly basis based on the income-driven payment that they've assigned to you. Now, two pieces of the puzzle related to this save plan. You might be on pay as you earn, PAYE. You might need to stay on that one because it's a 20-year plan, whereas save is usually a 25-year plan. But pay as you earn is going away as of July of 2024. So you're going to want to work with a professional to see, hey, should I stay on save or should I get on the repay plan? Which one is better for me? And how do I know, which one I need to pick? Because sometimes paying for 5 years longer but paying less works out to your advantage versus, being done 5 years sooner and paying a little bit more. You just got to see what is right based on your particular situation. So, as I said, none of this stuff is one size fits all. It's very important that you don't look at what your friend is doing or what your colleague said, or like I said, taking the information off the internet. Like I said, I've given you a lot of broad information, hopefully just to cut the light bulb on today and say like, hey, let me tune in a little bit more to some of these things that might be relevant to me. Let me go read more about them. Let me go gather more information so that I know what is right based on my specific situation. Because I can't say it enough. What you don't know can absolutely hurt you. And so I thought that, while this is a shorter episode, I mean, I kind of got a little long-winded. It could be a whole episode, honestly. But what I'm adding on to the back end of this, for those of you that just can't get enough of this podcast, is Travis Hornsby is the owner of Student Loan Planner. And like I said, he's who I side hustle with at Student Loan Planner. We are swamped right now, but we are open for business, taking on new clients. So if you need help with your student loan plan, absolutely recommend that you jump over there. Like I said, there's a very small and very unlikely possibility you'll be getting me for the month of August or September, as I'm pretty much fully booked. But what I love is that in 2018, the podcast that you're getting ready to hear, I found Travis online, like I said, trying to learn everything I could about student loans, bumped into somebody else who was as interested as I was in student loans. And so just said like, hey, like this guy seems pretty educated. I'll have him on my podcast. And at the end of the episode, he's like, hey, I got this business. I got more volume than I can handle. You seem pretty educated on this. I haven't found very many people that have as much passion as you do around student loans. Would you like to work at this company on a very open-ended independent contracting basis? And so began my journey into my student loan side hustle that, like I said, has become work that I am really, really passionate about. My goal was to like build my business and kind of back off from student loans, but it's so rewarding to literally be able to change somebody's life in 60 minutes that I have not been able to stop working as Student Loan Planner. So we are going to hear today Travis Hornsby's story. He's been on the podcast twice. I will link to his second episode because the second episode, he talks about being a part of the FIRE movement, actually being able, being fully retired, even though he's working voluntarily right now. He's actually just started 2 more companies, but being in a financial situation where you actually don't have to work and how he got to that place. So you'll get a little bit of his story today. You'll get some more student loan knowledge. And then if you're just fiending for a little bit more, you can go to the show notes and get his second episode where he talks about his financial situation even more in depth. So without further ado, I hope you found this information helpful. Please share it with a friend or a family member that has student loan debt because sharing is caring. Let's get this party started. Today, I've got a really special treat for you guys. Travis Hornsby is here, and we're going to talk about his money memoir. But when we get to the end, you're going to find out a lot of information about student loans. So, Travis, thanks so much for being on the show today.
Great to be here, Lauryn.
Well, let's start kind of at the beginning of your story. Tell people a little bit about who you are, where you come from, and in telling that story, tell us a little bit about what your first memory of money is.
I come from a little town called Pensacola, Florida. It's in the Gulf Coast, and got 2 brothers. Dad was a teacher. Mom was a nurse and didn't work for a large majority of my childhood because of some health complications and just her desire to stay home and try to keep us under control. And so we didn't have a ton of money. 1 income teacher household, $40,000 a year, something like that. If we did go out to eat, it was always eat off the children's menu, even if you are 14 and you don't really look like a kid anymore. Like, see if they'll let it slide. Order water, don't order soda. If we're going out to the movies, we're going to go out to the second round theater that you can go to a movie for $2 after it's been out for a month. I had a very frugal upbringing, and my parents were really into saving, like very, very good savers.
Were they also into like coupon clipping?
Yeah, well, a little bit of that, but they would probably take it even a step further and just never even use the coupon and never buy it in the first place. We had our own garden. We grew some of our own food. My mom, whenever we had something to do around the house, she would just tell us to go do it. Whatever it was, we just had to figure it out. She had this free labor force of 3 sons around whenever she needed something done. It was a great childhood. I mean, my parents were really great to us, gave us all these opportunities despite their income level. I also had a huge influence in my life. My grandfather was really into investing, started investing when he got out of the service in World War II, and was really passionate about following different things in the Wall Street Journal and knew about Vanguard and knew about index funds and all those things. And so I got the really good saving, money management, don't go into credit card debt piece from my parents. And then the investing, the potential of compound interest, what that could do for your life, I got from my grandfather. So 2 things kind of put together was really what caused me to be not only a frugal person, but to take that and want to invest that to grow financial security for my future and for my family and for hopefully charities one day. For my first money memory, I had a piggy bank and I saved everything that I ever got. So my great grandmother would give us $5. She would send us a birthday card and give us $5. And I would just shove that into my piggy bank. And so the first time I think I checked it, I think I had like $102 in there and I was 6 or 7 or something. And so I was just really proud that I'd saved $100.
There was no point that you remember being that kid that bought the candy bar or as soon as you got the money, had to spend it. You were pretty much a saver from the very beginning as it relates to the influence that your parents had on you, really creating that saving mentality in your household.
There was a time, I think, when I was in kindergarten where I just took a candy bar, walked out of a gas station and didn't pay for it. I didn't really understand that things cost money. So it was kind of funny. My dad kind of went into cahoots with the guy that was the convenience store owner and pretended that I was in big trouble, that I was going to go have to spend a night in jail for what I had done. And I felt so bad. I mean, I thought I was in such big trouble. And, I think it was just my dad trying to teach me a lesson that, hey, just because you want something doesn't mean you can just get it. And hey, also things cost money. You can't just take what you want. So I think he just wanted to kind of scare me a little bit. So I guess if I have to pick a first negative memory about money, it's probably that one. I went with the positive one first,
Right. Well, those are important things that do shape our behaviors as adults, though, and whether we're responsible or not, or how we internalize or digest those memories of money are very important in shaping who we are. Like you said, some really good influences. And you said that was a conversation I'm sure your dad had to have with you. Were there other conversations? Like you said, they were big savers. You remember your grandpa investing. So was money something that you say was frequently talked about in your household amongst you and your siblings even, and then also your parents?
Yes. Well, my granddad always told me these stories about the Depression because I was fascinated by them. And he told me that his family got foreclosed upon. They lost their house during the Great Depression and they were on a farm. His father was a high school principal and he got paid for that. But during the Great Depression, of course, the little small towns that couldn't collect any property taxes. So the county government gave my great grandfather a promise to pay him on a note, which doesn't pay the bills. And so he tried to use that to pay for the mortgage and they said no. And so they had the house foreclosed upon them. That's like 6 or 7 kids just out on the street. And so that was an intense, visceral memory that my granddad had. And so he would share a lot of those things with me. And even though I didn't experience the Depression, my love and admiration for my granddad just kind of made me feel like I was a child of the Depression, even though I wasn't. I got to go through the Great Recession myself and see kind of what happened. And a lot of people in Florida, especially where I grew up, lost everything because of real estate speculation. I mean, I had discussions with people that were big spenders, but nobody that was that close to me or that important to me in my life was ever a big spender. And I think that really was this huge, from just a pure financial perspective, a huge blessing because I never saw kind of very destructive behavior modeled for me to emulate. So I have to say that I was very, very lucky that I had this incredible foundation from which to be successful on.
That sounds like an amazing opportunity to grow up with a grandfather that shared so much information with you, and it sounds like it had a really profound impact on you. So what was the first time that you felt like you kind of were in control of your money and you needed to be responsible with what you had? And what were your kind of general thoughts as a young adult?
So I got very lucky as a 18-year-old, and I got a scholarship to go to University of Florida. So I got to have the mentality that because my family didn't make a lot of money, I had to go cover my own college. That was kind of my approach. So I applied to a bunch of different scholarships, tried to go to an in-state school instead of the best school you can get into mindset, and was really lucky with that. And so I had tuition covered, and I had a little bit of money coming in too, just to cover living expenses, and I had a little bit left over. So that was tremendously empowering, being in college and undergrad and not having to go through the typical struggles that a lot of people have to go through, which gave me the opportunity to have a little bit of money left over to put some money in investing and make mistakes investing in individual stocks, like a lot of young, foolish, especially guys tend to do, I think, and having to figure out how to make sure that I had a budget, not go into a bunch of credit card debt. So I think I was probably claiming myself on my tax return pretty shortly after I went to college. So I guess to answer the question, the first time is probably when I was 18 years old, my fall semester, freshman year.
Did you work while you were in college?
I did, sort of, I should say, because I didn't work in the same sense that my buddies did, where they were actually going to work 25-hour-a-week part-time jobs while trying to also do classes and do engineering course loads and things. I was a economics and statistics double major, and so I had tough classes, but maybe not quite as bad as a lot of people. And I also worked as a research assistant for a professor in the economics department. So I would do projects for him, and I think it was minimum wage, and I probably only worked 5 to 10 hours a week most weeks. So I worked, but not in like a really work your tail off kind of sense.
Gotcha. Was that the first job that you had, or did you work in high school at all?
I worked in middle school. So,
in middle school.
Yeah. Well, depends on what you mean by work. I was a timekeeper and scorekeeper for a basketball league at church. The minimum age in Florida was like 13 or 14 or something if you got sign off from, I don't know, something like that. And so I was allowed to work very short amount of time, but I was working maybe 5 to 10 hours a week, just kind of hanging out Saturdays. It was the best job I've ever had because all I had to do was just kind of sit there and make sure I didn't leave the buzzer on too long. I could do homework. I could read sometimes. If the score was so high, they just turned off the scoreboard because it was really young kids playing, so they didn't want to make anybody embarrassed. So that was probably my first job. And then my second job, I was at the front welcome desk at church, and I would just try to make sure the building was secure and help with special events and direct people where parking was. And when somebody would wander in and need help, I would try to connect them with resources. I never really had to work super, super hard. I was real strategic with my job. So I wanted to make sure that I had lots of free time to think while I was on the clock.
It's awesome too to be at such a young age, being able to associate, I'm putting in this work and I'm putting in this time and someone is compensating me for that, and to just instill that as part of your work ethic. And then you said you were doing stats in middle school and then you were majoring in economics and statistics. So did your love for that come from being a statistician in the middle school, or like what were you planning on doing with your majors?
I was trying to set myself up to be a PhD economist. I wanted to be a professor and be everyone's favorite professor because of how fun my classes were. And I was trying to prepare myself to get into a top 10 economics PhD program, which requires a ton of abstract math. And one thing that's about my personality is I have a really hard time spending tons of hours on something if I don't see a clear personal benefit from it to myself or others. The abstract math was a tough thing to just fall in love with. And I found out that that's what most people do in lots of economic research is you're doing a bunch of abstract math. You're not just running regression analysis and trying to find different causal things happening in the economy or something. And then I took a class with some abstract math course and I totally failed it. It was so bad. 3 people got C's and 1 people got A, and everybody else either dropped out or failed the class. And so I just realized that my best talent was probably not going to be a PhD professor. So I had these double majors. That's what I was doing. And I found this out really late. I found this out into my junior year in college. And so I'm like, oh, great. It's too late to go get a traditional internship at a bank or something like that. And so now I'm going into senior year and I have no plan. So I started reaching out to a bunch of different people and participated in all these job forums online. And I found randomly got a job at Vanguard, which was what I thought my dream job was going to be. And so I eventually ended up sitting in the bond trader's seat for the mutual funds there on a team that managed a lot of money for the mutual funds. And it was fascinating. It was really interesting, but it wasn't what I felt called to do. I just felt like something was missing. And I discovered a lot of people are familiar with Mr. Money Mustache. I discovered the idea of financial independence, and I was already a really good saver, but I had no goal behind it. And so then I discovered that, and I realized, oh, I can save up and be financially independent and just do anything. And so I focused on that for the 3 years while I was working at a college. And then I quit. I wrote a terrible book called 25 is the New 65, How to Retire Early and Do Anything You Want. And so I took like a year and a half off. I traveled the world. And right before I left on my trip, I met the woman who's now my wife. She had a bunch of student debt. And so I was traveling. I had all this intellectual energy again because I felt so free from corporate existence. And I found this really terrible problem that she was dealing with, and then all of her friends were dealing with. And so I made a bunch of models because I'm a bond trader background. I made that for them. And then that kind of snowballed, and their friends started telling their friends. And then I made a website and got really lucky with hitting this nerve on Facebook. All these veterinarians started sharing this article I wrote. And then I just started writing more and more and more, and eventually built the business into what it is now, where we've helped over 300 million in student debt, about 1,100 clients. Anybody out there who's listening that is scared about entrepreneurship or taking a chance or rolling the dice and betting on yourself, do it. I had a year and a half before this business started becoming even a thought, really, where I was struggling and just not knowing what to do with my life. So it wasn't an instant success. I had a blog that was nobody read, and I blogged for a long time and just never got anywhere with it. And then I just started talking about one specific problem and focusing only on that one problem. I kind of found where my calling and the world's great need intersected. And that's what's led to the success in helping people.
I think you told your story such in an amazing way. Is this idea that you don't have to start at this one place and only go down this narrow road. We always say, like, stay in your lane, stay in your lane. There's no real lanes to what your life can be. So you're like, oh, economics major, to I'm going to get my PhD and I'm going to be an awesome professor, to like, oops, I'm over here at Vanguard and this is now my dream job. Like, just kidding. I'm going to be talking to people about student loans, and this blog is going to take off and it's going to turn into a business. And here you are, an entrepreneur who's helped 1,100 people with student loan debt. You never know where life is going to take you when you start at the beginning. You're talking about like being a junior and you're like, oh, like this is not really what I want to do. And I'm sure it was like a moment of crisis in your junior year. The world's ending. I've gone down this road. I can't turn back. I don't have proper internships, etc. But I think sometimes we get so caught in the moment with whatever that current crisis is that you don't realize life is a journey. There's multiple paths that you can take, and you're just at some stop along the way to what's going to lead you to where you really want to be. And you even wrote a book along the way. So how cool is that?
I wrote two, actually. I wrote one called Mastering Your Money in Your 20s and 30s, and both of them combined, I think, have had a grand total of 800 downloads on Amazon, and 600 of those were free. So anybody who's thinking about doing a book, just know that you're not going to make any money on it. But the key thing is trying. You can think of all the cliches about if you don't try, but it's very true that it's 100% chance you're going to fail if you never attempt something. And what typically will happen is that you're going to try several times and fail a bunch before succeeding. So you've got to take the chance, but I think you also have to listen to the world out there and what are people really frustrated about, and kind of translate your skills into that. The student debt problem in the US is a massive problem, and it's getting worse by the day. I'm to the point, Lauryn, where I'm having 67-year-olds with $300,000 in student loan debt asking me, am I just going to work until I'm dead?
Yeah. I mean, the student loan crisis is something that is like this phenomenon, but yet so many people feel so alone. Frequently, my clients come to me and like, I'm the only one that's doing this, and I don't understand how everyone else is going out and having fun. And I'm going to, like you said, I'm going to be paying this thing off until I'm dead. And they're 25 or they're 30. And they don't think that there's anyone else that's struggling with this. But yeah, the truth is there are people all across the country that are really, really suffering with this student loan debt, but there are strategies to it. Let's go back for one moment. You worked at Vanguard, and then let's talk a little bit more about your transition from that space into becoming a student loan expert and what you're currently doing now. And so let's just go back to that transition a little bit. How did you organize your finances too in the process of that? So you were working for someone, W-2 employee, to I'm going to be an entrepreneur. How much savings did you build up to go off on this thing on your own? And how did it all play itself out? How did you prepare for it?
I could be really transparent because I've talked about this in public before. So when I graduated college, I had about 40,000 in savings and investments. So that was a huge start with no debt and having that level of savings and investments. So I was starting from a really positive place already.
And most of that was made up from just jobs, and you didn't hit the lottery while you were in college.
Full transparency, I probably had a little bit of 529 money that I didn't need to use. So I maybe converted some of that, but probably about 2/3 of that was because of me, and 1/3 of that was because of some a little bit of extra, 1/3 to a half maybe. So that would probably be what the family contribution was. So it's kind of important, I think, to just recognize that I had incredible privilege just growing up in the household that I did with the values that I was exposed to, and the fact that my parents even had any foresight at all to have a little bit extra money like that for me to not have to start out life with a negative balance, but start out with a positive balance. And then when I was totally off on my own, I went to work at this big corporation for 3 years, and I had a very high savings rate. So I maintained probably like a 65 to 75% savings rate of what I took home. And so I just lived with a bunch of roommates. I paid off a junky car. Whenever I did entertainment, it was typically always free entertainment, digital antenna, don't need to pay for cable. I was really hardcore back then. And so I put all of my money into investments and got very lucky because 2012 to 2015 was an incredible bull market. So there were years where I put away 65, 70% of my pay, and I ended up putting 100% of my pay away that year because the market went up 35%. So I ended my working career with maybe about 20 or 30,000 savings, and then I would call it a very low end 6-figure investment amount. And some of that was retirement savings. So, maybe about a third to a half of that was retirement savings. Those are funds that I mentally was not prepared to touch, right? So thinking about entrepreneurship, the key is just having no big obligations or minimizing them as much as possible, and then having at least $20,000 cash in the bank, but preferably a little more than that, to feel like you can draw that down all the way down to like $5,000, and then you can sell some of your investments and replenish that savings account to 20, 30,000. So that would be the big advice that I would have for anybody that's trying to start something, is to be super financially secure and utilize your W-2 life to get to that point where you can take the risk. And when I quit, I want to make it clear, I didn't have a plan. I've never made a business plan. I've never gone through any kind of formal process, never market-sized things. Like, yeah, I do that informally, but I'm a very imperfect entrepreneur. So I want to make the listeners know that they can do this. It's not something that only Mark Zuckerberg is somebody that can do like this, right? Most entrepreneurs that are successful are people that are making good money, doing what they want with flexible lifestyles, and they're making 6 figures doing it. That's a typical, very successful, very happy entrepreneur. And a lot of times you start making more than that, and life starts becoming more stressed and fun. So just have like specific goals of what you want out of a business, I think.
More money, more problems, for sure.
True. It's true.
I know someone's listening going, you crazy millennials, you didn't have a business plan? How could you dare go off on your own? And now you're calling yourself an entrepreneur? What?
Millennial life coach. I'm going to sell avocado toast and dole out life advice for an hourly rate on the side, right? Like, in all seriousness, it's just I had a set of skills, the Excel skills, that were very well developed because of the job that I was doing. So I was just taking knowledge that I had from my job and I applied it to a problem that not a lot of people were thinking about in a sophisticated way. And what I found is that in the bond market, there's all kinds of super smart people taking advantage of all these opportunities because there's all this money out there to invest and be made in that world. It was just hard. It was a hard life to do well and to say that you're successful in that world. But in the student loan world, the person on the other end of the table is Uncle Sam. And when you do something that improves the outcome of your student loans, you're taking money out of the profits of the student loan system that the federal government runs and putting it back in your own pocket. So because there's not this sophisticated Wall Street shark on the other end of the transaction, it's way easier to have a huge positive outcome for someone. So I just kind of realized that and just focused on it relentlessly, didn't get distracted, thought about doing other things, but just tried to tell myself, no, just keep doing this. Like I've said, we've helped tons of people, but I want to keep it about the listeners, though, because they're the ones probably listening to this. Maybe they've got some student loan debt. Maybe they think there's no hope for them. And the reality is there's more hope than you ever dreamed possible. So that's the good news.
So where does a typical person start? I know you have a physician wife, and physicians are often the ones that people get, oh, you make so much money, they're living such a lavish life. What a great thing for you to be a physician. But what people don't realize, a lot of physicians get saddled down with student loan debt because going to medical school is expensive. For those who are in these kind of more affluent jobs or professions and have pretty hefty student loan debt, what's your advice to that particular group, those with high earnings, but also really high student loan debt?
The high earnings, high student loan debt people are in good shape because the good news is that you have options and the bad news is that you have options. So you've got the cash flow, you have the ability to make decisions either way. So you could go for forgiveness or you could go for refinancing. Those are the two big ways that you pay back student debt. And for forgiveness, you would have to see, is your debt to income ratio going to be below 1.5 to 1 is the typical rule of thumb I use. So if you're going to owe less than 1.5 times your income, or you will soon, then refinancing is probably going to be the way to go if you're in the private sector. So you got to think, when do you pull the trigger? Just whenever you're financially capable of paying your loans back with a 10-year standard monthly payment or less on a refinancing deal, that kind of says that you're ready to refinance and just try to get rid of the student debt. But the problem with some of these high income earners is they don't know what they don't know. Some high income earners, like the kind of the positive behaviors, are when they will do something and like they'll outsource because they make a high income, so their hourly wage is high, so they need professionals in their life to handle other things. There's a lot of the real smart folks I run into, but some of the folks I run into, maybe it's a pride thing because you had to be so smart to get to that level, but they want to do everything themselves. And so just an example I'll give you is the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. So you have to work 10 years for a not-for-profit full-time to get that program. A lot of physicians don't realize that when you hit a certain income level, your payments are capped. They don't go above a certain amount. And so if you hit that point, then you can cap out your payments and stay on the some IBR or pay-as-you-earn type of program as long as you set it up the right way. And you can limit your payments and still get hundreds of thousands of dollars forgiven tax-free on your student loans, despite the fact that you might be a urologist making $300,000 and having $250,000 of student loan debt. So I see a lot of people abandoning the PSLF program right now that are just going to really be hurting themselves and smacking themselves when they see how a lot of their colleagues are going to get a lot forgiven. Basically, somebody who refinances they shouldn't, that's probably $100,000 to $400,000 mistake.
Wow. I think one of the things that we take for granted is that these high income earners have it all figured out. And like you said, it's always about strategy. That's the reason I started this podcast. Is it's not so much about the numbers as it is about the strategy. And the strategy is what leads to you, like you said, you improving those numbers or those numbers really inflating on you. You're the high earner. You've gotten all these different degrees. I'm so smart. Of course, I should be able to figure this out. And people don't realize that, yeah, you're an expert in your area, whether it's law or medicine, all the different things that you do. But there's also financial professionals out there. There are student loan experts that can help you come up with the proper strategy to help you take advantage of the savings that are available, taking advantage of not paying more than you need to. The same way we don't want to pay more taxes than we need to. It's a strategy. You don't have to cheat on your taxes, but you do need to know what's going on. And that's why you hire an accountant, so that you can have the best strategy to save yourself the most money. Yeah, I think it's just really important for those high earners to not say, oh, I'm just going to set it and forget it, or I'm just going to do this, but to think, how can I make my dollar stretch as far as possible as well? Because, someone that's strapped for cash is definitely trying to figure out how to make their dollar stretch. So let's transition over to the more normal people and those that are necessarily the high income earners. What kind of tips and tricks do you have for them?
Let's think about a lawyer that has $250,000 of law school debt from attending a top 50 private school. So this $250,000 debt, let's say they make $80,000 a year in a small firm that's focused on family practice law. That attorney is probably going to have payments of maybe about $160,000 over a 20-year period of time if they selected just a payment plan that I'm going to discuss just as an example, the pay-as-you-earn plan. So that's a 20-year payment plan, and you pay 10% of your income. So this family law attorney could pay a limited amount even though their income is pretty solid by median household income standards. But the debt is just so troublesome because it's like the average mortgage debt, but you also want to buy a house. So you're like two mortgages, one of your brain and one of your house, right? So you're paying $160,000 or something like that. And then the debt is forgiven at the end of it, but you pay taxes on that. So that forgiven debt is taxable income. And let's say that you owe 150,000 of taxes when those loans are forgiven. You'd take the payments, about 160,000, and add the taxes, about 150,000. That's about 310,000 of total dollars that you would pay over a 20-year period. Now that still sounds pretty bad, except that when you take into account that it's over such a long period of time, the cost of doing that strategy in today's dollars, if you use something called present value, you can just kind of discount the cash flows to today's dollars and figure out what the inflation adjusted cost of something is. So if you look at that and you compare it to private refinancing, which might cost you about the same amount of money, but over 10 years instead of 20, then you realize that actually, pay as you earn could save you maybe $50,000 to $100,000 compared to private refinancing. So that's a very common scenario where that $80,000 a year attorney thinks, you know what, got $200,000 of student debt, I got to get serious. Their pay as you earn or their revised pay as you earn payment is like $500 a month, but they're paying $1,000 instead. That's an extremely costly mistake because all you're doing is you're taking about the same amount of time that you'd take to pay it down if you did a forgiveness plan, and you're just paying down that forgiven balance that's going to be taxed. So that's a common mistake that I see happen. And so some of these lower earning individuals, it's actually even more of a good idea to spend the scarce resources that you have getting a plan in place and committing to that, to actually care about it, because you can take an $80,000 a year person and turn them into a person that's going to have max retirement savings for the next 20 years. They're going to have $500,000 of retirement savings, and plus they're going to fund their tax bomb account. Well, they'll be able to pay their student loan tax burden, and they're going to be in a position where they're going to be in their 40s or 50s and still have this awesome career and financial security going on. And so their families are going to be just fine. And that's a case where somebody might feel hopeless, like there's not any options for them. The reality is nothing could be further from the case. There's always tons of approaches that you can use to help somebody no matter how bad their situation is.
I hope that the listeners are taking this in. You can come up with your student loan strategy and also be saving for retirement, be thinking about your plans for the future. So frequently you hear people that are just focused on the student loan debt, and the mindset is, I got to pay this debt. I got to figure out a plan around this debt. I can't save $1 until I figured out what I'm going to do with this debt. And then they sacrifice their savings in the short term and their savings for the long term because they're so focused on the debt. But if you have a real strategy, you can in fact do both. And retirement is going to come whether this debt gets paid or not. So what are we going to do 20 years down the road or 30 years down the road? You can't not think about that because you see this one thing in front of you. It's like you got to deal with both of these things hand in hand. And I just encourage the listeners to think also, I can be saving while I'm taking care of my student loan debt.
Yeah. And the reality is that somebody with student loans has the same financial opportunities and downfall that a lot of people do that don't even have any student debt at all. So as an example of this, if you're a low-income person or even a high-income person who just have even higher student loan debt, the student debt is not really a debt, it's a tax. It's 10% of your income. That's what you have to pay. And the additional issue with it is you have to save maybe 2 or 3% of your income into a brokerage account that you're going to invest so that you can pay that tax burden associated with loan forgiveness one day. So think of student loans that you feel like you can never pay off as a tax burden rather than a debt. And then pretend that you're in Sweden for a second. If you're paying 65 or 75% in taxes, do you want to earn more money or less money, all things equal? Probably more, right? So given that it's a tax, well, then all that matters is like, what's your take home pay and how much of that are you spending versus saving and investing, right? And also because it's a tax, what do you do when you have really high taxes in a high tax state where you're trying to save for retirement? You put money into a pre-tax retirement account. So because student loans are calculated based on your adjusted gross income, your payments, that means that if you can lower your adjusted gross income and increase your wealth, then your student loan payments will go down. So one of the key strategies that people should use when they have student loans is maximizing their retirement accounts, because this lowers your student loan payments and it also increases your wealth long term. That's something that's good advice for really anybody, but particularly somebody with student loans and somebody with a bunch of student debt. I think that you should look at your house and look at your car. And if those two choices that you're making in your life don't reflect the fact that you owe a bunch in student loan debt, then you probably should make some changes to one or both of them. The experience that I've had from talking to so many different folks is there's almost never a really insecure financial situation that a family's in that's not in some way related to their house or their car. If you can get rid of your super high car expense by selling a new car and buying an old reliable Toyota or Honda or something, then you could have that extra money freed up to save instead of spend. And if you buy a house, try to keep it to 2 times your family's income, because then you can have more money left over for maxing retirement accounts and putting money into the tax bomb account and also living life, which is the whole point you got the degree in the first place.
Yeah, I think these are all really great tips. Just one more thing on the student loan topic before we transition. Federal versus private. I think a lot of people are confused about the benefits and the drawbacks from being in one versus the other. And I know we talked about refinancing a little bit. Can you go over a little bit of being in the federal loan system? Like we talked a little bit about forgiveness, and that's not something that exists outside of private. So just maybe like the 2 or 3 differences between federal versus private and outside of the federal system with your student loans.
Sure. So the federal system is going to have typically higher interest rates if you have good credit, and it's going to have a lot more borrower protections. So you have 3 years worth of forbearance where you can put payments on pause with the federal system that does not exist on most private loans. And you can also pay based on your income. So that's just a very positive thing that you can do to just protect yourself. That's one point that I would make with the protections that you get. Now, the private loans often carry lower interest rates, which is the primary reason that you would use a private loan, right? Because otherwise, why would you trade your federal loans in for a private loan with a different interest rate unless you were making savings on that? Who does that make sense for? Somebody who has 6, 7, 8%, who wants to get like a 3, 4, or 5% interest rate so they can get out of debt faster. And a lot of the best private lenders out there that want to refinance your loans, they'll offer some level of protections where they'll put your payments on pause for 3 months at a time if you lose your job or have some sort of interruption in your work. So there's a lot of protections out there that exist that you can utilize if you know where to look. But in general, the worst situation that somebody can be in is having a bunch of private student loan debt and a bunch of federal student loan debt, because then you've created 2 separate payments. So I will say that I've never seen a case where somebody has only federal student loan debt where they're in deep trouble. I have seen some people that have a lot of private loan debt with federal student loan debt, and they are in deep trouble.
Yeah, I just think it's something to be cognizant of, is you said the protection that you have inside of the federal system and the lack of protection that exists outside. So when you're thinking of going from federal to private, you're getting rid of a lot of those protections. So that means you're pretty much committing to paying this debt off. Because when you're in the private system, there's a lot less leniency, and there's calling and saying like, yeah, could you give me a break, please? And they don't necessarily have to say yes. There is no income-driven plan for private loans. So just being cognizant of the liability and the idea that the only way to finish private is to pay it.
Yeah, once you got that debt, listen, it's time to go Dave Ramsey, Susie Orman on it.
Right.
cut out the vacations, cut out the lattes, trim the budget, trim the fat, get rid of the debt fast. That's the solution to private loan debt. And some people, they can do that. Now, there are some rare cases, I will say, where people have more debt than they could ever hope to pay back, and it's private loan debt, and they happen to live in one of these states with really good borrower protection laws. And in some limited cases, I've heard of student loan attorneys that really understand the laws in those states being able to get very attractive settlements, especially with Navient student loan trusts. But that's very one-off. Typically, your state's not going to allow you to get a settlement on your student loan debt for private loans, and it's going to be a very rough experience getting that settlement. So it's just generally not a good idea to even contemplate bankruptcy unless, say, you have $200,000 of loans with Navient and you happen to live in like a northeastern state that's got very consumer-friendly borrower protection laws. You might have a shot with the right attorney. In general, yeah, the private debt, you just got to get rid of it quickly.
Yes. We're usually Money Memoir, and we went off track a little bit, listeners, but I feel like Travis had great information that he needed to share with us. So let's transition a little bit back to like your personal story. You're married, you're running this business, and you've got to figure out how I'm going to organize my finances going forward. We've established that you're a great saver, have been your whole life. But from a strategy standpoint, let's talk a little bit about how you discuss money as a married man and what it's like to discuss with a spouse and organizing the finances. Like, how do you have those conversations with your wife?
I met my wife at church when we were in Philadelphia. She was training at the time for fellowship, and I was doing the bond trading and living in the city and trying to experience that young adult life. So we met there, and I was really impressed because we were at this benefit night for the church, and she had this dictionary in her hand, like a Webster pocket dictionary. I was like, what are you doing with a dictionary in your hand? And she's like, it's not a dictionary. And she opened it up, and it was a purse. And I said, ooh, this is a girl I need to get to know. So she and I started dating, and it was kind of perfect timing and terrible timing at the same time, because that was right when I was planning to do my year travel around the world, and I wasn't planning on meeting anybody. And then life comes at you, right? So I met her, and then we kind of dated long distance for the better part of a year, and then decided I had to kind of put up or shut up, so to speak, with our relationship and where it was going. And so I decided to move to St. Louis for her career, and moved here. And basically I was trying to get her father's permission to marry her, because it's pretty old fashioned, where I grew up, that's kind of the way they do it. And I asked, and he said no.
He said no?
Yeah, he said no. And what's worse is he even brought her mom into the room and said no together. And I was like, oh, whoa.
Yikes.
This went different in the Lifetime movie. So I was, well, why? And he said, well, you don't have this regular source of income. This is back when I was kind of considering myself financially independent. I was working on a book, and I wasn't really financially independent. That's too strong a word to use, but I had enough that I didn't have to go back to work the next day. You know what I mean? And so I said, well, tell me why you're not comfortable with it. And he said, well, you don't have that regular source of income. I said, well, I have significant assets, and your daughter has a lot of debt. So who's in the good position here? And he's like, I know that. But if you love her, you'll prove to me if you want my blessing. He said, you don't need my blessing to get married. And I understand that. But he said, if you want our blessing, then you'll show over the next several months significant effort to prove that you can maintain a solid income.
He's like, go get a real job, because you're not marrying my fancy rich doctor daughter.
Yeah, I know. I think it was more like, get away from my daughter, you gold digging millennial. I don't need a job. You Brooklyn tattoo fancy coffee drinker, get away from my daughter unless you're wearing a suit and tie to work at some big Fortune 500 company with a pension.
Right.
I think it's really kind of natural. They're immigrants to America, so they have a very different notion of the idea of, I think, a man's not working in a regular job is something that they're not very unfamiliar with. Mm-hmm. But that was motivation, though. We went and visited them in New York this weekend, and I was joking with them. I said, I should have given you some stock in my business, because you're responsible for it. Because honestly, when I got that ultimatum, I hustled. I have to make this successful, because if it's not, the only companies in St. Louis are Wells Fargo and Edward Jones, and I'm not going to sell no freaking load mutual funds. I'd rather, sell snow cones or something at Cardinals games. I don't know if they do that, but that's probably what I'd rather do. And so I just had to be successful. So I had the push, the drive to do it because of this desire to gain approval. And that worked. And I joke that every time I have an increase in revenue, my in-laws just love me more. It's so funny. Our marriage kind of had a huge financial piece to it that's very independent of any kind of student loan business. Right. When talking about money with my wife, Christine, she is very much I don't want to call her a spender, because that kind of implies that she doesn't save, but she's mostly I don't care about money. That's kind of her mentality. She could not care less about how much she makes, what she gets paid for her work, how much she puts into her retirement account, or what financial decisions that she makes. It's mostly just, she doesn't want to have credit card debt. She wants to pay everything off at the end of every month, have a little bit of cash that goes into savings, and then get her match. And so she jokes that whenever somebody asks her a financial question, her response is just, index funds. That's what she just responds to everything. She doesn't care that much about it, but she knows enough to know that you should invest in low cost investments, right?
Right.
So discussing money with having me being this extreme saver and her being kind of, I would say, a middle of the road spender, produces a little bit of conflict sometimes, because she'll spend maybe a couple $100s a month on clothes. She'll buy a nice dress, probably every month. She'll buy some outfits for work and things like that, just because she looks good and likes to look good. And there's nothing wrong with that. And then she compromises a lot on things that are really important to me, like not having a big housing expense and not having a car payment. So she gives a little on those areas, and then I give a little on the areas like the clothing budget and going out to eat, where we spend a lot of money compared to what I did back when I was single. When I was single, I would just eat a thing of carrots and put some chicken on a George Foreman. That's my dinner, like going out to eat is a very foreign thing, but it works. And so we have two separate accounts where she calls it like her get out of town money, kind of jokingly, but we have most of our money in our joint account. And then we have retirement accounts we try to set up and maximize. And we have a joint brokerage account that we invest in together. And she doesn't yet understand why I think we're doing that because, again, she's not financially driven. But I joked that, I was like, hey, Christine, our joint brokerage account, we've got enough in there now where we could buy you a nice dress every month for the rest of our lives. And she's like, well, what do you mean by nice? And I said, $100 a month dress. And she goes, come on. She goes, that's not a nice dress. That's just like a good dress. Like, nice dress is like 300. So you have a lot of work to do. And so it's funny because I think that it's helpful because the danger with me is I'm so interested in finances and money and helping people fix those things. It's like just what I'm so deeply passionate about that it's really, really helpful to be married to someone like her who's kind of like pulling me back a little bit.
I think it's cool though. You guys kind of have that yin and yang and you kind of balance each other out in that regard. Sometimes we think like, oh, save her good, spend her bad. It's not like that at all. It's just about being aware of where you are and, like you said, creating balance in the midst of that. So if you're a spender, having those safeguards in place. And so you still have a plan in place and it still allows her to be able to spend. It's just not spend all over the place. A spender is a personality. It is not necessarily a way of life. Like you said, this bad thing with a negative connotation in the way that people paint it.
Life is not all about money. And she's a lot more generous, I think, than I am, just in her disposition and her desire to give back. Tithing and things like that is just very important to her. So she's a great influence on me from a perspective of making sure that money is not my master. And that's important because like a lot of times you look at folks and like society thinks that Bill Gates and Warren Buffett are the two most successful people in the world, or Mark Zuckerberg or somebody like that. And that's not necessarily the case. It's not about who gets the biggest amount of money in their life. The biggest bank account doesn't matter in the cemetery. I think it's about what change you've affected in the world and what calling and how you've helped people. And so I'm lucky enough that I've found something where I can do a little bit both of those things. And I don't feel bad. Like it's kind of tough too, because I would have a hard time in some fields trying to sell something. But in this world, I don't have a problem telling a teacher with $40,000 a year of income that the smartest thing they could possibly do is to pay us to make a student loan plan for them. And the reason is because I know that we get tremendous results because of how complicated the systems are. 90% of cases, we save people an average of $60,000 over the life of their loans. And the average loan balance that we're dealing with is $280,000. So it is large. But the reality is if you don't get a student loan plan, then you're not going to make a lot of good decisions in your life about retirement, about emergency fund, about how much you should be putting towards your student loans. And you're going to waste a lot of valuable life energy because you're going to your job and making money and it's misallocated. So you're literally wasting hours of your life that could be taken back and used for things that you'd rather do. So I just think that you got to get control of your life. And also with something like this, you have to have commitment from the person. It's kind of funny. Like a lot of times people will wait so long to reach out. And when they finally reach out, they're in a pretty rough situation. And it's kind of like that payment of a consult fee too is kind of like a commitment. It's like they're actually saying that, yes, I've got a problem. Yes, I got to do something to fix it. So you have to invest something. Maybe that's time. Maybe that's money. Maybe that's energy. And you know this, Lauryn, way better than I do. But you have to commit to making positive change. So I love it when somebody is not looked at their loans or doesn't even open their statements anymore. And they go from that to like having a clear plan and not feeling burdened anymore. It's just a fantastic feeling.
I think you just hit the nail right on the head. Commit to making positive change is a great way to sum it all up. And that's different for everyone. We all are unique. We all have our own unique money goals. We all have our own unique money personalities. But committing to being responsible is part of it, and not waiting till you're on life support to show up and say, oh my God, help me now. Understanding that this is an investment in yourself and your peace of mind for the long term.
Yeah.
This was a great episode, Travis. I want to keep talking for another hour, but I'm not going to. I'm going to wrap us up with our final sprint. All right. So these are some questions with some quick answers. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
You got $20 in your pocket right now. What do you spend it on?
Dinner.
Ooh, worst advice you've ever received?
Buy a car because it looks nice.
Best advice you've ever received?
The best way to be successful in life is marry well, not marry rich.
Marry well, not marry rich. No gold digging, people. Worst money habit. What is your worst money habit?
Probably throwing money at things in my business that I hope will work that never do.
Oh,
I'll just experiment with something and I kind of have loss aversion. So I'll throw some more money at something that didn't work. And so I'll make an investment, just to give somebody an example, like having a Pinterest profile. Like I'll try to have a Pinterest profile and then I'll spend money on it and then it doesn't work. And then I spend more money and it still doesn't work. And then I do it, I keep doing it until finally I felt like I've spent enough money on the problem that I've convinced myself that it's not going to work. My wife likes to remind me about that because she's like, you're spending this much on that thing that didn't work out. Wow, like look at this really beautiful hotel we could have stayed in Paris. 1 year anniversary, instead of you throwing money away on a Pinterest consultant. So, but yeah, it's probably my worst money habit is like anyone's susceptible to loss aversion. That's a real thing.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I'm supposed to be fast.
You're totally speaking my language. So, you have to take risks, but at the same time, we kind of go a little bit overboard sometimes with that risk taking. Yeah, it's like, oh, this didn't work for the 5th time. Okay, maybe I'm done with it now. What is your best money habit?
Just keep relentlessly saving and investing for the future.
I like it. Relentless saving, not just saving people, relentless saving. All right, last one. Most meaningful gift you've received. Who was it from and why was it meaningful?
My first car that I got when I graduated high school, because my aunt gave it to me and my aunt really didn't even know me all that well. It was like a $2,000 car, but to me, it might as well have been a $200,000 car because I just never thought anybody would give me something like that in my life. And I just was really touched by it.
Oh, that is really nice. I did think of one more question. Totally random, just because I want to. Most student loan debt that you've seen?
About $1.1 million.
$1.1 million in student loan debt?
Yes.
How many degrees was that? Like 15?
More like 3. Undergrad at a high-cost private school, followed by dental school, followed by orthodontic residency. So this person was an orthodontist making about $230,000 a year, and they had $1.1 million in student loan debt. So the next time you go to the dentist, if the person's under 40, tell them how much you appreciate them, because they're probably in a lot of world of hurt.
Don't tip your cab driver, tip your orthodontist.
Yeah, and the orthodontists are people that people think are just rolling in dough, right? And here's this orthodontist who, were it not for the federal income-based repayment programs, this guy'd be out on the street.
1.1 million? If you feel like you got it bad, we just created some perspective here today. All right, this is for real, the last question. So our motto on Worth Listening is you don't have to get it all right to be all right. And it's based on the premise that we all make mistakes, but the mistakes is not the thing that's crippling. It's the inability to deal with the mistake that can cause this thing to become catastrophic. So with that said, we want to avoid mistakes. So our final question for you is, what is one thing you would like to improve about your personal finances in the upcoming year?
Communication with my wife on what our priorities are and make sure we're swimming the same way.
Swim in the same direction. That is wonderful. I love it. This was a wonderful episode. Travis, you are a true champion. That was our final sprint. You've made it to the finish line and you're standing on the podium. As you stand on the podium, I'm going to give you the honorary Worth Listening podcast medal, and this is your time to shine. So shout yourself out. Tell us how we can support you, where listeners can find you, everything you want us to know about how to make you be great.
Well, people can reach out to me. My email is travis@studentloanplanner.com. And I would suggest that if you've got a bunch of student debt, or maybe your clients have a bunch of student debt, if you're a financial advisor, go to studentloanplanner.com. You can click on the blog and see everything we've ever written. And so we've got a ton of free stuff that's going to help you. We've got a calculator you can download. That's what we use actually in our consults. And you can just go play around with it and see how powerful it is and how it can help you save money. And we've also got these refinancing bonuses where you can get as much as $500 cash back and get a lower interest rate. So all kinds of resources on the website. You can use like the contact button on the website in the bottom right-hand corner to reach out, or you can just email me. And I think that if you've got anybody in your life that's got student debt, or you do, you're going to be really helped by it.
Travis, this was amazing. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Thanks for having me, Lauren. Great to be here.
I hope you enjoyed listening to Travis's money memoir. You got a bunch of great information about managing student loan debt. I love the part where he broke down the scenario for both high income and normal earners. I think that part really illustrates the importance of a personalized strategy and really the importance of talking to a student loan expert. Like me and Travis. Yes, shameless plug there. Travis also shared that many people wait until they're in a bad place before reaching out for help. Don't be one of those people. Be proactive about getting help before poop hits the fan. There are all kinds of goodies and resources in the show notes, so make sure you check those out. The word of the day, income-driven repayment. Travis talked about the many different payment plans offered in the federal loan system. An income-driven payment option can help you make your student loans more affordable. Now, this is one of those good options that is provided because you're in the federal loan system. So be aware of those people that are calling, telling you they have such a great deal for you if you just refinance your loan with them. You don't want to lose the protection of the federal system unless you are absolutely sure about your payment strategy. That's why it's important to talk to someone about how you can make the right decision based on your situation. Thank you for tuning in today. We hope you found this episode worth listening to. If you have questions, suggestions for guests, or you would like to share your money memoir, please contact us through our website, worth-listening.com.